All right, so we are now about to be blessed to hear from Corey Robinson. Corey Robinson is a certified executive, having attained certifications from the SHRM, that's the Society for Human Resource Management, and the HRCI. She is Director of Human Capital for Everett Partners. With over 20 years of HR experience, Ms. Robinson's unique strategic background in corporate HR, advisement, employee relations, executive recruiting, and legal discretion have benefited her clients with proven success. Prior to working with Everett Advisory, Ms. Robinson served as Director of Financial Services for Taylor Mead, serving clients in the banking and financial industry. This followed her role as Senior HR Partner with BBVA Compass Bank, having oversight in retail, corporate, and CEO control units. Ms. Robinson has served in a variety of positions, providing leadership on employee relations, policies, and practices, managerial training programs, and employee handbook improvements and employee engagement methodologies. These include HR management for Regions Bank and Home Depot. Today, Ms. Robinson has corporate oversight in HR, counsel, and administration and executive recruitment. In addition to her role in the business world, Ms. Robinson works as an actress in the film industry and has performed in several national films. She also continually works in commercial and print modeling for agencies both in Birmingham and Atlanta. Please welcome Corey Robinson to our discussion. Ms. Robinson?
Hey, good morning, and thank you so much. It's been really, really great to be part of this awesome panel today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys so that we can get started. Let's see here. Hopefully you guys can see that, where we are at so far. So with the consideration of time, I'm going to jump right on in. I'm really going to focus today on our influencers and how they play a huge role in, both within our children, as well as how that translates over into the business world. Most of your students are going to go on to possibly have some sort of leadership opportunities in life. And so that may be that they, they decide that they're going to go work for Dick's Sporting Goods and just be the department supervisor over the apparel department, or they may go on to be CEOs and do huge things in their lives. So we're going to talk right now about how that is going to impact them. So we know that EQ, emotional quotient, is what it's called. It's kind of like IQ, but it's EQ. It's your emotional intelligence. In the business world, we call it people skills, interpersonal skills, soft skills. And psychology today said that people that have a large amount of EQ are highly conscious of their own emotional state, and they have an ability to manage it. And people with EQ are especially tuned into the emotions that others are experiencing, such as empathy. Empathy is a huge, huge word there. How it's obtained. Well, there are some people that just seem to have this innate nature to have empathy for others. But for the most part, it's developed through early childhood on into adulthood. For those who have not established it during childhood, they do have an opportunity during adulthood to establish empathy and some of this emotional intelligence. Is a little tougher in adulthood because they have to mentally say, I want to develop these skills. So let's look at how those lessons come about. First of all, they're impacted through mentors and influencers. These are people that are pouring into the younger generation the traits that are taught by your family, your parents, teachers, coaches, peers, mentors. Anyone that's in a leadership capacity are pouring into our younger generation how to, deal with your emotions. These influencers actually set the tone for a safe learning environment. The lines of communication are open in these situations, and the child or the young adult understands that life happens, but the issues are not bigger than they are. They can be resolved. They can be conquered. Mistakes happen. Mistakes, and grace is extended to actually foster and, the belief that, again, those mistakes do not define the person, and it does not define their future success in life. Like Dr. Shields said, a lot of grace is extended when we are teaching others how to have emotional intelligence. There's this really great story about Jack Welch, who is the former CEO of GE. He tells a story of being in his 20s and being the manager over a plant that experienced a huge explosion. Now, Jack was called to the New York office to explain what happened. He was mentally preparing himself to be terminated. He knew he was going to get fired. But to his surprise, instead of being fired, the executive just calmly asked him, "What happened? And do you know how to fix it?" So this executive actually moved the fear over, and he took away the focus from the mistake, and instead they could actually move forward and be forward thinking and focus more on the resolution. So when we're taught that the person is more important than the problem, the individual does tend to stay forward thinking, stay tuned into resolutions. So what's happening? We are coming. And again, it does empower them, it empowers them. So after high school or college, we have students coming out of a very controlled environment where they have a lot of oversight from parents and teachers and a lot of guidance and those kind of things from different avenues. And they are going into the general workforce, and they are dealing with personalities and being able to take direction and stay focused and accountability and time management, responsibilities and prioritizing tasks and teamwork. And then it's just all, with no one jumping in to save them, right? So if EQ is not picked up throughout childhood, they are having to kind of figure it out as they go. And sometimes that comes with hard lessons the later they get in life. So I actually was asked to conduct some mock interviews with one of the local CTEC schools recently. And during those interviews, I had interviewed a young lady. She was a senior. And I said, "Hey, I see that you worked for Chick-fil-A for about 3 months. Can you tell me a little bit about that?" And she said, "Well, I actually got fired. There was just a lot of drama with some other girls and we couldn't get along, and they wound up firing me." And so obviously at that point I stopped her and tried to coach her through a better answer for that. But, the self-awareness, being aware of how you're presenting yourself, and those things are really, really important. And I think that we need to try to, instill that in these children, the self-awareness, and also, we need to try to focus on how to help them get along better with others. So why are we investing in the emotional intelligence of our younger generations? Well, simply put, relating well with others is both a discipline, and it is crucial for their success in life, even if they're not going to go into a leadership position. Melanie Wilding, she is a performance coach and a behavior professional at Hunter College. She actually said there are 7 key traits for people that have high levels of empathy. They're fully present with others. Okay, they are tuned into those nonverbal communications. They tend to pause and reflect. They have mastered the art of active listening. They replace advice with asking questions. They speak in terms of we instead of me, and they try to imagine others' points of views. So National SHRM actually just recently on June the 9th, put out a survey on LinkedIn asking professionals, what lessons did you learn from your first job? Now, due to time, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but if you kind of look at these buzzwords that I've highlighted there: respect, be nice, mistakes happen, have good character, don't burn bridges, don't overstress. I love that one thing. It says, it's not brain surgery. No one's going to die. Okay. Be appreciative, have patience, treat people how you want to be treated. Learning to know other people's skills, get to know them, be humble, and give your best, no matter if a kid spits in your face. Okay. So, there's some things that people have learned in their first job. And I question, hey, couldn't we have taught that a little bit earlier in life? So let's just say there is a huge paradigm shift for businesses to begin focusing on emotional intelligence. And it's because, like I said, so many of our students are growing up to take on these leadership roles. So let's talk a little bit about that. So companies have begun to realize that leaders are more likely to lead with emotional intelligence if the company values it. So if a company rewards a supervisor for task or the number of widgets that they are producing, and for example, and not the relationships, then the manager is going to think that the relationships are not really that important, and they'll focus on the widgets, even if the widgets are defective and even if it's causing a lot of turnover for the company. So what you reward is what you get. And I think that plays out in every aspect during our life. So here's what they have found, that leaders that have a strong sense of emotional intelligence, they have a strong sense of self-awareness and empathy. They have a greater ability to establish relationships with coworkers and managers. They are more successful. They tend to be able to foster trust and respect in team environments. They have an increase in production, an increase in job satisfaction between themselves and their employees. They are more collusive and collaborative, and they typically invest in others. Now, on that flip side, those who have weak emotional intelligence, they often lack self-awareness and empathy. They just can't meet people halfway and try to get in their head and figure out, where are you coming from? They don't tend to develop the good relationships. They don't deal well with conflict. They're more direct and controlling, and they tend to isolate people, which is really not good for promoting people into leadership roles. A lot of these companies are beginning to build out leadership essentials that includes some sort of EQ training. So, actually, a whopping 71% of employers surveyed by Career Builders said that they valued emotional intelligence over IQ. Isn't that interesting? So I think in the classroom setting, are we valuing the people more than the task and the learning and things that we're trying to instill in them? Are the grades more important than they are? That sort of thing. So a couple of interesting things to share is that there are a lot of businesses that are focusing now, like I said, on EQ. One of them being Motorola. The Motorola manufacturing plant began putting more value and focus on emotional intelligence, and the result was 93% of employees became more productive after the facility adopted stress reduction and EQ programs. So the reduction, they had a reduction in lost time accidents. It boosted their productivity. It sharply lowered formal grievances after the supervisors received training and emotional competencies. And then we have the Sheraton Hotel. They actually did a one-year EQ development program, and the result was that they had greater customer satisfaction and market share and significant reduction in staff turnover. There are a number of other companies here that have absolutely decided to do that, and there are many more out there. And the whole story about Jack Welch and a couple of the others that I shared with you, there's a lot of CEOs out there. If you look at this website, there's some stories out there that you can definitely tune into. So human capital is our number one asset that a company has. And connectivity is the key to its success, and that actually drives performance. So students are no different than employees. They grow up to be employees. They have to have leadership from someone with strong EQ to show them how to meet others halfway. And I'm going to close by with a very, very quick story about my daughter, Gracie. She was in K4 way back in the day. She's 16 years old now, but back when she was in K4, she had loved school up to that point. She was in day school, and she had a K4 teacher that just did not understand 4-year-olds. She expected them to sit for 30 minutes quietly, hands in their lap, and listen to her lecture about the moon and planets and things like that. And so it wound up being a lot of compounded negativity because her whole class was bad all the time. Okay, her whole class just got in trouble. A lot of parents were getting together and talking about it. She expected the parents to reinforce discipline when they got home. This one did that, this one did that. Just none of the kids did anything right. Well, Gracie had went from loving school to hating it, crying every day when I dropped her off. And she just gave up. Like, she mentally gave up. It was hard to break through to her. And so when we got ready to go into kindergarten, she didn't want to go. And she cried and she begged me to please take her to work with me every single day. And I was like, Gracie, I can't do that. So we were getting ready to go into kindergarten, and there was a Meet the Teacher. And before the Meet the Teacher, she had sent out a questionnaire saying, hey, I want to get to know your students. What are some things that they're struggling with? What are the things they love? Gracie just happened to be one of those students that loved being a big girl and being helpful. And so when we had Meet the Teacher, Miss Little, her kindergarten teacher, said, Gracie, I've been waiting to meet you. And she said, I have a feeling you're going to be one of my big helpers this year. And Gracie was a little apprehensive, but as school got started, what she learned was that as if Gracie started trailing off and you know, kind of not really doing her work and that sort of thing, the teacher would say, "Hey, Gracie, can you come to my desk for a quick second?" And when Gracie walked up there, she said, "Listen, I have a feeling I really need you to be my big helper today. If you can get your work done, would you mind sharpening all the pencils for me?" Oh my gosh, Gracie was ecstatic. She loved the idea that she could be a big helper and sharpen all the pencils. Man, she got her work done. She was forward thinking. She was focused. And there was just a huge shift with her. And it was evident because when she'd come home and play with her dolls and play school, I would see her teaching the same way that Miss Little taught. We're talking about kindergarten. So it starts very early on in age, how you're pouring into your children. And I failed to put my contact information on my slide today. So I'm going to hold up my, if you can even see it, I'm going to hold up my card for you guys. And I'm also going to say thank you so very much for allowing me to be here today. It's been awesome. Okay.
Valuable. Our next question is for Ms. Robinson. So we have someone who's specifically interested in what is your personal approach on onboarding your executive team to invest in developing emotional intelligence in their current workforce as well as maybe their future workforce? How do you approach that?
Yeah, that's what that's why a lot of these companies are actually beginning to pour into the leadership to start with, because they actually set that example. And, it's been a history that we're moving away from people being bosses and managers and trying to get them to step into leadership. And leadership's a whole different ball of wax. Leadership is, getting their buy-in and knowing that when you hire people, sometimes they know more than you do. I mean, so we're actually, I think a lot of companies are really trying to pour in there. And like I had mentioned, they are starting to build out leadership essentials. So before people step into a leadership role, they have to go through certain trainings. And one of them being, trying to sharpen their people skills.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that addresses certainly the answer that we were looking for. And I think it also segues into Dr. Brown's wrap up and comments in regards to what our next session might need to look like. So Dr. Brown, please.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson, I did want to ask one question. I know that you heard from the school districts and you heard from the State Department level, and they are having to do a lot of things in order to adapt to what's going on. And we already in the poll question asked about the responsibility of businesses and industries to help them through this process. So what are some suggestions? This is a call to action. This is a two-part question. What are some suggestions to the business world that you can think of? Hate to put you on the spot right now, hearing what the State Department and what the school districts are having to manage, where it seems like they're having to deal with this by themselves. What are some things that the business and industry sector can do to help? And are you willing to take this question back to your leadership team so that they can come back and say, here are some resources that my company can provide for the districts that are in our area? So 2 parts.
Yes. Okay. So to start with, I actually personally am beginning to work on building out a curriculum that I'm hoping that I can help the schools with and be able to get that out to the schools, because I think a lot of times, your students, they don't know what's to come and they haven't seen through that lens yet. I'm the VP of College Relations for Birmingham SHRM. So I'm actually working with these administrators to kind of pull in some of my HR peers to walk into some of the schools and help them provide professional development for a lot of the students. And we may be training them on, here's what sexual harassment looks like in the workforce. You date somebody, you break up, doesn't go too well, somebody could get in trouble there. Diversity and just cultural, awareness. Maybe it's just helping them write a resume that looks decent. It could be, how do you actually walk through and do well on an interview? So there's a lot of things that we're working on there. I'm also on the Workforce Development Committee with the Shelby County Chamber. So we go into some of the high schools and we do a number of things. One of them is helping the children prepare a budget and know what that looks like. The other is, we'll go in and meet with some students that have been selected. They'll come in and ask a lot of business leaders. We'll have them all together, and they'll ask a lot of business leaders some questions. And I think that's where I'm the most enlightened, is to hear some of these questions and to be able to share with them. Yes, we can see your social media. And yes, if you've got it on private, we know somebody that knows somebody that can see your social media. Businesses are checking these things. They're looking at these things. They're also, when they're calling you, do you have your voicemail on? And if you do, is it professional sounding? Are you checking it? To make sure your businesses are calling you. Are you checking emails? So there's a lot of things that I think that on the business side of it that we can come in and help with. And we're hoping to get that developed out. And hopefully I'd like to work with some of you guys on that. So hopefully, did that answer your question?
That's great. That's awesome. I don't want the schools and the districts to feel like they're having to fight this battle alone.
No, you're not alone. And if you'll call me, I will help plug you in with whoever you need to be plugged in with.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Brown, if I can just chime in with what Ms. Robinson stated about social media, that's something that students need to be aware of when it comes to college admissions as well. If you're doing things on social media and you're posting things that aren't appropriate, there's a possibility that your admission could be rescinded. It is contingent. So that's something that, parents and educators need to make sure that students are aware of that as well.
Okay. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, don't let them keep you from your destiny because you want to just fly off the handle. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.